The question then is, how did America create this system? Okay. Well, it did so through the Constitution. The idea of the Constitution is to create a game and make this game above power, okay? And how they did that is creating a system of government that checks and balances each other. So you have the president, you have the Congress, okay? And you have the Supreme Court. Okay. The Supreme Court, it's very simple. It's to interpret the Constitution, which is the highest law in the land, okay? And then the powers of the government are divided equally amongst these different branches. So the Congress can create laws and control spending, okay? What's called the purse. The president has war powers, basically, or the sword. Okay? But if the president were to declare war, he needs Congress to approve because Congress has to give the money to start the war. Okay? And the idea that the Constitution is the highest law in the land means that it's really rule of law. Okay? So even though you have this government system in place, you also have another parallel system called the judiciary, the court system, which protects property rights in the same way that they do in Britain. Okay? Does that make sense? So the very idea is that this is a game. The government is a system to maintain the openness, clarity, and fairness of the game. And because of this, America was very quickly able to dominate the world. Okay? The thing about this game, okay, that's very important for us to understand is it is expansionist. Okay? So what happened is that in its history, America faced certain challenges to this game, and this game won out every single time. Okay? So the first major challenge to this game is called the American Civil War. So let me explain what happened. From 1861 to 1864, the Civil War was fought between the North and the South. This was a clash of economic system. Okay? The North played the game, okay? And so it believed in free labor. The South was its own independent economic system that focused on agriculture, and so it used slave labor. For many Americans in the North, slave labor was offensive because it corrupted the game, okay? Because remember, America was founded on the idea of openness, fairness, and clarity. But if you're a slave, that's not fair, okay? Because you were born a slave and you can never participate in this game. And so they fought a civil war to decide who will triumph in the end. And of course, the North won because the North focused on free labor. So that meant that there were more people in the North. That meant that the North was wealthier because of manufacturing. And that meant that the North were more energetic, okay? So they defeated the South. And so that was the first major challenge. Now the game is spreading, okay? It spreads across America, and now it stops because America can't expand anymore, okay? It basically conquers the West. And now the game is an issue because of the nature of money. The problem with money is that ultimately, the longer you play this game, at the end of the game, one person controls all the money. Okay, does that make sense? That's a problem with capitalism. That's a problem with this game. So now that the frontier has been settled, now that the borders have been controlled, a few people are now controlling all the money, which leads to the Great Depression. Okay, so now the solution is America has to go and conquer the world, which it does. Okay, in World War II, America conquers the world, and so now what America needs to do is spread this game throughout the world, and it does that by creating the U.S. dollar. Okay, so 1945, America wins the war. A year before, in July 1944, for 1 month, what happens is that America organizes something called the Bretton Woods Conference in New Hampshire, okay? And the idea of the Bretton Woods Conference is to establish the world game, okay? Before, America's game was limited to America, but now America wants to scale its game to the entire world, okay? So how does it do that? Well, first thing it does is it makes the US dollar the reserve currency of the world. All right. What does that mean? It means that every other currency has to be derived from the US dollar. Every other currency will find value from the US dollar, okay? Which means that if you have Canadian dollars, you can now change it for US dollars, which is what's valuable. The Canadian dollars is just not valuable, okay? All right. They also agree on exchange rate. Okay, does it make sense? Okay, and this is a system that we have today. Okay, all right. The global reserve currency is the U.S. dollar. That's what's valuable. The renminbi derives its value from its relationship with the U.S. dollar. The renminbi is not valuable by itself. Okay, all right. That's number one. Okay, so now you're like, wait a minute here. If this is true, then the U.S. dollar the Americans can just print as much money as they want. And so to solve this problem, the Americans said the U.S. dollar will be pegged to gold. Okay? Does that make sense? Okay, meaning like you can always take your US dollar and exchange it for gold. And because there's a limit to gold, there has to be a limit to the US dollars, which keeps the system stable. Okay? All right, that's number one. Number two is America needs to expand this game, okay? Because it is in competition with the Soviet Union, which is against this game, okay? So it creates two new organizations to spread the game throughout the world. And these two organizations are called the World Bank and the International Monetary Fund, the IMF, okay? So for the sake of simplicity, okay, understand this. The World Bank, their job is to give you loans. Okay, so let's say you are China and you are poor, right? And you need to build dams. Well, the World Bank gives you money. And when it gives you money, what it does is it allows you to start playing this game, okay? It allows you to participate in this game. Now, what always happens is eventually the countries borrow so much money, they have to go into debt and they can't pay off the money, right? So then what happens is the IMF comes in and changes your government and its economic policies to make it conform more to the game, okay? Does that make sense? And its main mechanism is called privatization, all right? So what the IMF says is, okay, well, you're inefficient. You can't pay off the debt because you're inefficient. You're inefficient because the public should not be in control of the infrastructure. The public should not be in control of water, okay? Private companies should be in charge of the water and electricity and the land, okay? So the goal of the World Bank and the IMF is to spread the game throughout the world, all right? Okay, then in 1947, they create something called the GATT, okay? The GATT is a General Agreement on Tariff and Trade. So this is the WTO basically, okay? Let's change it into the WTO in 1995. All right, so it's basically an agreement on free trade. Okay? Does it make sense? 1973, SWIFT. SWIFT is an agreement amongst different banks in the world on how to transfer money, okay? So, for example, if you want to transfer money from China, RMB, into America to go to university, right? Guess what, guys? It has to go through SWIFT. Okay? So now it allows for more cooperation among banks in the world to use US dollars, right? Now, the last thing is, okay, how do these countries get together and decide on how to cooperate economically? And the answer is the Bank of International Settlements, okay? Okay? And the idea is that the central banks of different countries get together and they agree on certain policies, all right? And this is all done privately, in secret. No one knows about them, okay? All right, so this is the game that America creates. It's very simple, okay? And there are other components, but we'll focus on this now. Throughout the semester, we will focus on how this game is played specifically, but first I just introduce it to you, all right? Okay, so now let's talk about how the US dollar conquers the world, all right? So for the longest time, this system works well, okay? The United States is in competition with the Soviet Union. But over time, the Americans start to abuse this system. So they pay for things they can't really pay for. For example, the war in Vietnam. For example, a space race. For example, something called the Great Society, okay? They're just spending too much money. And other countries start to freak out. So France basically withdraws all its gold from the United States. So in 1971, what Nixon does is say, you know what, here's the secret, guys. We actually don't have enough gold to pay off everyone, okay? So screw this. We're not gonna peg the gold, the dollar to gold anymore, okay? Do you understand? You can now no longer redeem your US dollars for gold. It's done, okay? So now what happens is the US dollar becomes a Ponzi scheme, all right? What is a Ponzi scheme? A Ponzi scheme is basically the US dollar is valuable because people want to use it. Do you understand? There's no value in itself. It's only valuable because people want to use it. So now Nixon has to go and create demand for the US dollar, right? So the first thing he does is he goes to Saudi Arabia and he creates something called a petrodollar. Okay? The idea of the petrodollar is very simple. Saudi Arabia, which is the largest oil exporter in the world, will only accept payment in US dollars. Therefore, if you want oil, you have to have US dollars. Okay? That's the first thing that Nixon does. The second thing that Nixon does is actually even more important. What does he do? You guys know? He visits China. Okay? Not only does he visit China, but he's established a framework in which America will give China everything, okay? In the 1980s, what happened? America gives China its market access, right? Now, US consumers can buy goods from China. That's a huge deal, guys, okay? That's number one. Number two is America gives China FDI, technology, education, all right? Imagine what happens. America gives foreign investment to China, gives all this capital to China, gives all this technology to China, right? All these military secrets that America has, it gives to China for free. And not only that, but America educates the Chinese elite. Okay, in the 1980s, all these Chinese students for grad school go to America to learn American technology, okay? And the third thing, and this is the most important, is military protection. all these conflicts that China has with Southeast Asia, with Japan, Vietnam, America will now protect China. When Chinese ships export goods to Europe, Africa, and the United States, the US Navy will now protect these Chinese ships. Okay, do you understand? And you're like, oh my God, America gave China everything. America made China rich. Why would America do that? And there's one answer, and only one answer. It's to make China use US dollar, okay? It's that simple. Okay? So now when China trades with the world, it gets US dollars in return. You understand? Okay? And the entire idea is to make the world addicted to US dollars. And now that the world is addicted to US dollars, now that the world depends on US dollars, America can now control the global economy. Okay? So in 1991, the Soviet Union collapses. Okay? And now America is the only game in town. There's no one who can challenge the supremacy of the Americans. And so now what happens is America creates something called the New World Order. The New World Order is based on global trade. But because the United States controls the US dollar, it can now control something called pricing. Pricing just means that the Americans can decide the value of everything, okay? So what America does is create a price hierarchy. So at the very bottom are resources. Above that is manufacturing. Then there's knowledge. And then finance. Okay? This is the price hierarchy for the world, all right? And it divides the world into a division of labor. Okay? So, what is resources? Well, guys, it's Russia. Okay? That doesn't make sense. Russia, Africa, South America. What's manufacturing? China. What's knowledge? Europe. And what is finance? America. Okay? Does that make sense? So what's going to happen is that America is going to take its manufacturing and transfer to China, okay? Because it's cheaper for China to do it than for America to do it. And all America is going to do is finance, okay? What is finance? Finance is just the creation of money for the purpose of creating more money, okay? So this is the system in place. And at first, it sounds great because everyone's making money, okay? But there are inherent instability in this system, okay? And we will discuss all this instability throughout the semester. But for the sake of simplicity, let's talk about America. What happens when you focus on finance is that you become a speculative economy. You focus on gambling, okay? Basically gambling. And this leads to something called the 2008 Great Financial Crisis, when the American economy collapsed, okay? And at this time, the entire world economy should have collapsed. And so what happened was, all these central banks from around the world came together in Basel, Switzerland, the Bank of International Settlements, okay? Right? The secretive body in which all economic policies are made. And they decide the only way to save the world is if China spends money. You understand? Why do we have all these skyscrapers? Why are there all these airports? Why are all these high-speed railways? Because China, to save the global economy, decided to invest in infrastructure, okay? And Belt and Road Initiative. And that saved the global economy. Now, after China did this, China developed a lot of debt, okay? And China basically said to the world, listen, we saved the global economy, so we deserve a seat at the table, right? We deserve to be equals to America. And so we're gonna sell our products, our Huawei phones around the world. We're gonna compete with America for global dominance. And America said, screw you, okay? And that led, of course, to Donald Trump. 2016, Donald Trump. And the first thing Donald Trump did, of course, was initiate the US-China trade war, right? China wants to be an equal to America. America says, nope, screw you, we're gonna destroy you, okay? So America tried to sanction China. America tried to blockade China, okay? So we'll discuss this again later on throughout the semester, okay? Then what happened, of course, is 2022, Russia invades Ukraine, okay? So what Russia is saying is, you know this price hierarchy? Screw this, okay? Because guess what happens, guys? If you don't have any resources, this system doesn't work, okay? Try manufacturing without any resources. Try having knowledge about resources. Try having finance about resources, okay? So when Russia invades Ukraine, it's trying to control the resources of Ukraine. Russia and Ukraine together controls 1/3 of the world's carbohydrates. Africa, the Middle East, starves to death without Russian and Ukrainian grain, okay? Does that make sense? So now this entire system is in jeopardy, okay? And so what's happening today is America is fighting to save its game. It's trying to fight to save the system. It's trying to fight to save the US dollar. It's trying to fight to save its hegemony, okay? And Russia and China are trying to exert themselves. So we are in a time of game reset, right? Game reset. And this is the world that we live in today, okay? All right.